Radical.
They're getting rich off us. And that kid with a backpack said radical. I say radical. That's my thing that I say. I feel like I'm gonna explode here.
Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get a city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1642 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management Inc. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making her Toronto Mic debut, is queer activist, minister, and former MPP for Parkdale High Park. It's the Radical Reverend Cheri DiNovo.
Well, good to be here.
It's good to meet you. My goodness, the Radical Reverend. Before the show, I said, what should I call you? And you said, call me Cheri. And I said, can I call you Rev? And you seemed okay with it. So is it okay if I call you Rev?
It's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Well, good to meet you.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to this, and I thought, where do I begin? We originally had this in the calendar for, I guess, about a week or so ago, and then we got buried in snow, so we postponed it because of the snow. And it just so happens now, here we are chatting the day after our provincial election, and since you were an MPP for Parkdale High Park, may I ask if you were surprised by what transpired last night?
No, I don't think anybody was. It was almost the same as when we left, right? But yeah, great waste of our money to have it all happen. And yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, profoundly so, I think. But and less than half the people went out to vote. That's sad. And that says a lot. It says a lot about voter cynicism. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it was something like 45.4% of eligible voters got out, which is actually up a little bit from 2022, which surprised me. But that's how bad things have got. But then I was reading way back in the 90s, we used to be up in the 60s, 60%. So just in a matter of a few decades, we've plummeted, 20-something odd points.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, this, of course, supports the status quo. Like when people are cynical and they don't get off their duffs to vote, then the powerful stay powerful and the people don't really speak because they're not, right? So, I mean, that's the way, the folk like it who are in power. I think that's depressing. I think, people died for this right, so maybe just get off the couch. The weather wasn't that bad. It really wasn't.
No, and there's so many opportunities to vote ahead of time. Like I voted the weekend before, but there's so many opportunities to vote ahead of election day.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse. Yeah. I don't know why it's only 45%, but I'm curious what you think of Bonnie Crombie as leader of the Liberal Party, because she lost her own riding yesterday. Can you lead a party if you don't win your own riding? Like, what's your thought
she
on
already
that?
has, right? I mean, she didn't have a seat and she ran. So I don't think much, again, nothing much has changed, really. The Liberals have added some seats. They're now official party status, but the NDP lost a seat or two, really. But again, this is not dramatic. Ford didn't get the mandate that he spent all our money trying to get. So again, it's more or less the same. And I think one of the reasons for the low voter turnout is polling, we're constantly inundated with polls after the writ is dropped, and their country said outlaw that, and for good reason, because essentially what they're telling you is there's no point. If you're not a conservative, or even if you are, there's no point in getting out to vote because the results are already in.
No, 100%. We knew there'd be a third majority here for Doug Ford's Progressive Conservative Party, but in this riding you're sitting in right now, there was, I get to say that past tense, there was a MPP from the Progressive Conservative Party, Christine Hogarth, and she was defeated. So the incumbent was defeated by the Liberal candidate, Lee Fairclough, and there's a interesting change from this election. But
yeah, I mean, that for you, that's for sure a change. But yeah, I mean, it's but overall, nothing much, right? Nothing much. And that, I mean, so don't have a family doctor, probably not going to get one. Waiting in the ER for 6 to 8 hours, yeah, probably going to be the same. ER closed when you get there. If you're in some communities, yeah, that's going to keep happening. One of the doctors posted on social media that, you get the healthcare you vote for. And I kind of retweeted that and said, yeah, and sometimes you get the healthcare you didn't vote for. Right. And that's really what happened to this election. So, I mean, it sounds like you're not a big believer in Doug Ford as premier of this province. Just a little, yeah. But, and I look at it and I always think, okay, I got to vote strategically here because it's first past the post, which I can't stand, but that's the system we have. And then I realize, I'd like to usurp, I'd like to defeat the incumbent RPC candidate. And I know NDP cannot win in this riding. This is South Etobicoke. NDP will not win. But I know that if I vote for the Liberal Party, we can defeat the Progressive Conservatives. But like across this province, the anyone but Conservative vote gets so split between NDP and Libs. I just wonder how, for how long will the Progressive Conservative Party benefit from this split that the progressive voters, pun intended, are splitting between NDP and Liberal Party? Does there need to be some uniting of the left to defeat the Progressive Conservative Party now? No, and in fact, it doesn't work. When you look at the polling, especially, we're inundated with polling constantly. And of course, we that are kind of poll whores, follow it anyway. But I mean, if you look at the federal, for a while there when Poilievre was hugely leading, that's changed. Yeah. But, they were looking at all the different combo packages, really, Liberals, and none of it made a significant difference. I mean, I think strategic voting sucks. I think that people should vote for and not against, which is what strategic voting does. And, things dramatically can shift when people do that. And we have seen that. We've seen polling, be completely upended because people all of a sudden got to the polls and voted, not the way that they thought they should, but the way they wanted, So, I mean, I say vote for the candidate you like, vote for the party you like, damn the polling. See, I agree with you that strategic voting sucks. We'll make t-shirts, strategic voting sucks. But with the first past the post system, I can't, I go for these bike rides and I think on it and I realize I may believe in the NDP candidate in this riding here, Ward 3, Lakeshore, Etobicoke, but I know voting for the NDP candidate helps the Progressive Conservative candidate because I know the NDP, for better or worse, this is Etobicoke. This is like the Alberta of Toronto, okay? So for better or worse, the NDP... Doug Ford territory, yeah, for right, sure. Like we are closer to the lake. It gets, obviously, we went Liberal this time, so we get a bit more reasonable closer to the lake. But I know you have to vote strategic because you have to do what it takes to prevent the least evil party. Like, I think we need to introduce ranked ballots so that we can vote for the actual MPP we want in our riding instead of voting strategically. Well, any proportional system is better than what we've got, for sure. I agree with you there. Like, it's crazy. And quite frankly, you can blame the Liberals for that. I mean, when they've had majorities, you can do anything you want with a majority government. That's very clear in many countries. But I mean, they've had those majorities and they haven't moved on that issue. issue, on the fair vote issue, and whatever you bring in would be better than this. So really blame it on the governing party. And the problem has been that the governing party got there by first past the post, so they're reluctant to change it, right? And here's where everything can shift very dramatically, and has. I mean, the Liberals went from first to worst at Queen's Park, right? I mean, that happened, and it can happen in elections. So yeah. Get rid of first past the post, undoubtedly, and meanwhile, I say still, vote for who you want, because you never ever know, and pollsters have been quite wrong, right?
Right, and back to that whole idea of when you have a majority, you can do what you want here. In 2015, I'm old enough to remember Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party of Canada promising to replace first past the post.
Yeah,
and they got a majority.
Yeah,
and it's still here.
Yeah,
it's almost like sometimes politicians lie.
Yeah. And sometimes they just simply don't keep their promises, and every party's guilty of that, I mean, I remember Bob Ray, and we should have had the auto insurance BC has, that our auto insurance would be like half the price it is in BC, and guess what? We didn't. He ran on that. He bowed to pressure. It's always bowing to pressure, usually. That's what happens. So.
Absolutely here. So I'm so glad you're here. We're going to, talk about the ongoing history of Cheri DiNovo, and we little bit of topical stuff off the top. One of which I'm hoping we can discuss, because you're such a queer evangelist, to borrow the title of a book people should buy. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But I'm wondering, are you hearing from American citizens who are fearful, like members of the LGBTQ plus community, who are fearful because of Trump's rhetoric? He signed an executive order on his first day, I think, saying there's only two biological sexes, right? There's only two biological sexes. And I was actually chatting very recently with Marcy Ian, who's an MP, and I said, could you theoretically try to qualify as a refugee if you're a trans person living in the United States right now? Are you hearing from a lot of people in the States that are worried?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's dangerous down there. I mean, depending on where you are, it's dangerous. I mean, way before Trump was elected, I'd booked what I normally do, which is to go to Southern California. Have my nephew and his husband live in San Diego, and we all meet up in Palm Springs, and family comes from here and there and everywhere. And, I mean, there are these little, places that, I mean, California is pretty cool. Every time we said we were Canadian, people apologized to us, Okay. But I mean, there are some places that are just downright dangerous, and there are rogue states like Florida and Texas and others where, don't say gay and don't be gay. That's for sure. So, I mean, this is going to get worse. And by the way, it's here too. 3 of our provinces have brought in anti-trans legislation, which is outing high school students or elementary students to their parents if they're questioning their gender. I mean, this is this is putting already at risk children more at risk. This will up the suicide rate. So we're only slightly better. I mean, we still have laws in place, but provinces are overturning them. So now more than ever, that's my focus now, is just trying to save children, because that's where we're at. We're at trying to save children.
It sounds like we're going backwards here.
We are. Luckily, the laws here in Ontario have not changed, but I'm holding my breath, and we're getting out ahead of it. I really love talking in high schools and universities, to educators particularly, or to anybody who listen, because it's really important for them to know their history, and them to know what laws we have, like banning conversion therapy. It still goes on because people don't know that there is a law preventing it for minors. So they just call it something different, right? So things like this are so important. They save lives. I was talking to a couple with a trans daughter who committed suicide after going through conversion therapy. I mean, this is happening in our province here. So that's happening. Don't be too
today.
Comfortable.
Yeah, that's happening today in Ontario.
Yeah. This was at the Pride. I spoke at the Pride flag raising at City Hall, and one of the speakers was one of those parents. And I went up to them after and said, you should sue this person. Easier said than done, right? But I mean, they have broken the law. They're part of a professional association. They should know that. But they don't, and they just call it something different.
Like, I mean, we're going to get to your ongoing history here, find out, who made you who you are today. But, we'll talk about the Affirming Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity Act from, I guess that goes back to 2012 or whatnot. It sounds like there are, there's people are just ignoring the law.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, trans rights are human rights is basically what that law said.
Absolutely.
And that was in 2012. It was the first in Canada. It was the first in any major jurisdiction in North America, actually. It took me multiple tablings to pass that bill. And remember, I had no power, third party, and back to the wall. So again, another reason for voting, with your heart, because, if you get a champion, it doesn't matter where they're sitting, they can really go to bat for whatever your particular interests are. So, so that was a major breakthrough. I was, I got the honorary role as at Pride that year and stuff. But I mean, again, and banning conversion therapy, it's the 10th anniversary this year. It passed in 2015, and that was for minors. That passed in a remarkably short time. This was working across the aisle, which again, doesn't much happen anymore, sadly, at Queen's Park. I mean, all the bills, except for that one, actually banning conversion therapy, I got passed with a member from another political party, a conservative and a liberal. So that kind of cooperation to get something done is just absent from Queen's Park, which is sad.
Well, I mean, I was reading that you passed more private members' bills into law than anyone in Ontario history.
I know, it's wacky, right?
That's a wild fact.
I know. One of the clerks told me that. I had no idea. I mean, again, working with others, we had no power. I had no power. And if you've got an idea whose time has come, and you've got, and of course, nothing happens alone. I mean, huge number of activists behind any of these bills, and there's always a face that goes with them. The one person that came into your constituent office or that you talked to that really was a champion. But I mean, that happened, and we got so much done that way. And this is kind of ongoing work that people don't see as committee work at Queen's Park and on the Hill in Parliament, and political parties cross the aisle, work together all the time. They come up with great suggestions on a number of different topics. Inevitably, none of them are acted on. So there's your tax dollars at work, and maybe one or two out of 30, But so that does go on. It can go on. We proved it. But it's just hyper partisan now, and it's the Tories are not prone to working with others.
So I have to get you to Queen's Park, but I realize where I want to begin, and I want to find out who you were before you sign on to We Demand. This is 1971. We're going back to here. So would you mind taking us back a little bit about your upbringing, your youth, and then signing on to We Demand back in 1971?
Yeah, sure. So We Demand was the first quotes unquote gay demonstration in Canadian history that we're aware of on Parliament Hill, and we say there were 100 people there. I think that's pushing it. I see us as a band of kind of utopian hippies, queer utopian hippies, right? And there was I have a great picture of the first Pride, which was at Hanlon's Point, the same year, the same group, and there's maybe 30 in that picture. A few of us left alive, kind of thing.
Well, in 50 years, we'll be talking about the 50,000 people who were there. So.
Well, there was a good crowd to unveil a plaque there just this last year, so that's nice. But yeah, so I mean, I was always an activist. I was a young socialist, member of the Young Socialists back then, and so, but I never had an interest in electoral politics. I mean, I saw sort of street action and we actually thought those We Demand demands, we thought they were completely utopian. Even we did. I mean, at that point, you could be fired then, people wouldn't rent you because you were queer, etc. And in fact, one person that signed on to those said, well, we didn't win them all, but I mean, it's a minor issue. I think not only did we win them all for the most part, but we also won more besides. Like, we didn't even think about same-sex marriage, for example.
Right.
We won that too. So I mean, it's been phenomenal. And we didn't have an understanding of trans rights back then in the way that we do now. So again, it's a great, and I tell this story often because people are so hopeless these days. It's like, a band of utopian hippies, actually change the laws of the country. And you can too.
If you can do it, we can do it here. So I was reading, you're kind of part of your origin story is that you were living on the streets as a teenager.
Yeah. I mean, not unlike a lot of queer kids now, even. So, yeah, it was a little less harsh back then. I mean, you could rent a room for $25 a week. But we couch surfed. We, slept at Queen's Park. I laughed when I got elected because I looked out on places I used to sleep when I was a kid, when it was warm weather, and we would just hang out all night. Home wasn't safe for a variety of reasons. Streets were safer, and that's usually what you'll hear from street kids, that they, got kicked out of the house. I didn't get kicked out. I walked out, but same thing. And I'm pleased for that origin really now, because it taught me to be incredibly self-sufficient, which I've been since 15. So this is the first time in my life I haven't worked full time every day. So
are you retired now?
I like to say semi-retired, because I still do public speaking. I'm running for moderator of the United Church. So if then your commissioners that get to vote, it's a very weird bureaucratic system there, in August. That's a long shot. But so I'm still hands in. I'm never going to totally be out of church and state. I'm kind of foot in both, but I'm not doing church full time, which I was for the last 7 years. So
okay, so what I need to know about being ordained. I called you
sure.
Rev. I think I started with the Radical clip from The Simpsons, right? Because I'm a child of the '80s,
yeah,
and everything was radical. Like I don't know what I guess I feel like possibly maybe. Terrorist groups like Al Qaeda and such, ISIS, it took the word radical and sort of changed the connotation, is what happened. So it's like we stopped using radical because people were confusing, thinking it meant something far worse. But everything was radical. You're the Radical Reverend. So please tell me about like your journey with the United Church.
Sure. So I walked into the United Church in 1988 when it was the only denomination in North America that ordained openly queer folk, gay and lesbians at that time. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I also walked in there because they were one of the few institutions that came out against the Iraq invasion. And at that point, I was making a bunch of money. I was living in the suburbs. I had 2 kids. And the other reason I always say is that we were driving along in Richmond Hill, and my son looked at an evangelical neon sign outside a church, and he said, "Mom, what's that lighted T for?" And so I thought, oh, this isn't good. How are they ever going to read Shakespeare? I mean, if you don't know something about the canon of Judeo-Christian history, then you're going to miss half of English literature essentially. So I thought, okay, where can I walk into a church? I don't have to leave my brains at the door, and the kids will learn these stories, which they were just stories to me. And so I did. And I walked into the church that had an open forum on the Iraq War, and that was also, pro-queer. And that was, a long time ago. So, I mean, and as one does, when you walk into places, I got more and more involved, had a great minister back then. I still consider a friend. And and just kind of never left. And at that point, the business world was shifting too in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. My business wasn't doing so well. It did very well.
What was your business?
We were affectionately called Headhunters, but personnel, recruitment
of course.
firm.
I remember when they were called Headhunters.
Yeah.
That's also gone in the do not use pile. Yeah.
I know. That industry has gone the way of anvil salesmen. Yeah.
But you'll still talk to somebody. Typically, they'll be in their 60s or so who will talk about, I just talked to a headhunter, or I'm being headhunted, or whatever. And we know what they mean.
Yeah, I mean, they still exist in a very kind of small portion of the labor market. But so the industry is shifting. There was a recession in the early 90s. And I thought, well, I could still, I'd have to go back into sales more than I'd had to do than just rely on a client base. I would have had to kind of maybe work twice as hard for half as much. But I could have made it work. And I but it gave me a breathing space. When the money's kind of rolling in, it's really hard to walk away from it. But that gave me a little bit of space to think, okay, so do I really want to do that? And I thought, nah, I don't. I can free up some equity and I can go back to school and do my master's. And at that point, and that was and I wanted to learn more about theology. Didn't know I wanted to be ordained, but once I went to seminary, that kind of became clear that was my path. Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm curious. So permission to speak frankly here?
Of course,
okay,
absolutely.
So we talked about, you're a queer activist. We talked about 1971 when you were I think you were the only woman to sign on to We Demand. So you're many a first for you. That's quite something here. But I take it you believed in God?
No, no. In fact, I didn't. The joke with the minister was I didn't believe in God, but I did believe that Jesus was God's son, right?
It's breaking my brain.
I mean, I just really, I really like the stories of Jesus. And I thought the deity through him, which I still do in many ways. I mean, when people say God, inevitably they've got the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in their heads, and it's an old white guy with a long beard, and too many muscles, right? So I mean, that is not what God is, and it's not even God, the Christian God, because it's like 3 in 1, right?
Holy Trinity.
Yeah. So I mean, so we could get into a whole rabbit hole about that. But the bottom line is, I've learned that what I thought defined God was not what God was, and that I could be, kind of a Jesus freak without having to buy into any of that kind of mythology. And so that's where I'm still at.
Okay, but you could believe in the power of Christ, if you will. The fact that he's kind of like a cool hippie. Right?
Yeah. Well, he was.
He doesn't have to be the son of God, right?
He was the original, well, aren't we all? I mean, in some ways. He was the original communist, is what he was. I mean, each according to their ability, from each according to their ability to each according to their needs. That was Jesus. And he lived it, right? So a couple of thousand years before Marx. So, I mean, there's that. So he modeled what that looks like, and also lived what that looks like. And yeah, so that's a pretty good guru, if you want to use that word, to follow. Yeah.
Okay, so when you were ordained, what church were you a reverend at?
Well, the United Church of Canada, which is still Canada's largest Protestant denomination, even though it's shrunk a lot. So you're ordained into the denomination, and then you go, like most people, go looking for a job in a church, right? And so that's how it works.
Okay, and is it Emmanuel Howard Park United Church?
That was the one I did the first legalized same-sex marriage.
Okay, tell me about that. Okay, because there's a lot of firsts with you, which is very cool here. But is it even possible I'm right now talking to the person who performed the first legalized same-sex marriage in this country?
Yeah, it's true.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And you know what? Here's when you live long enough, and I'm like older than dirt, when you live long enough, you get to see history rewritten in front of your eyes.
Right.
And so there's a lot of rewriting of history, especially writing women out, and especially writing people of color. I mean, Indigenous have taught us that, if no one else. And so it was me performing a marriage of 2 women of color. And we did it before the law had changed in Ontario or in Canada. But we did it by this ancient practice called reading the banns. So I read the banns out, which you can still do. It's if you get married in a church. So all you have to do is announce that you're going to do this for 2 weeks in a row. And if nobody objects, you fill in the banns form. You don't get a license from City Hall. And then you send that in. It's official government form.
Wow.
And we did that. And it doesn't say male or female. It just says bride and groom. So we filled in Paula and Blanca were their names, South American. And so I guess the registrar, in a holy act, we say inspired by God, thought that Paula was a man's name and signed off and sent them a license. So it became the first legalized, and then all hell broke loose. Of course, Government of Ontario threatened to take away my license. Church, strangely, was silent in terms of supporting us in my congregation and doing that. I did what every good Christian does. I joke, and I called a lawyer in CBC. So that's what saved me money in the interim, but by the end of that year, just shortly after that, it had hit the Supreme Court in Ontario, and they had rendered it anti-charter. So then it got kicked back to, so basically de facto became legal. And we managed to weather the storm between the hoopla and that happening, and the marriage stood. So there it is. Yeah.
Amazing. Now, for those keeping track at home, that was 2001.
Yes.
That's only 24 years ago.
I know. But it is 24 years ago. I mean, think about it. It's a long time. Yeah.
So what makes you at what point do you decide, hey, I'm going to enter this blood sport called politics?
Oh, I never thought of it. It was not my idea at all. Peggy Nash, who was our MP at that point, I mean, I had a nominal NDP membership. It probably, gone out, 10 years before or something. But she came and asked if I would consider it running provincially. And I never had. And it took me about 3 months to say yes. And I got some great advice from a couple of my congregants. One said, I wouldn't wish to sell my worst enemy, but I think you should run. Another said, being asked by a political party to run is like being asked to the quarterback to the high school prom. It's flattering, but then you have to spend the evening with a football player. I mean, there were some great lines. I took them all into account. I had no idea. I was so green what I was walking into, and I think that's why I did it. If I had known, I might have had second thoughts. Yeah.
And so when you're running to become MPP for Parkdale High Park, it's important to know that the previous MPP was Gerard Kennedy, right? A Liberal.
Not only a Liberal, but he was a cabinet minister, and he was running for leadership of the Federal Party, which is why he left that role. So it was quite a coup for the party. I mean, they hadn't had that seat in decades. So and then I won 4 more times, so was there for a bit.
Yeah, you were there for, I think, about 11 years or so. Yeah. And do you remember who was running for the Liberal Party the first time you were elected?
Sylvia Jones, I think. I can't.
Do you keep track? Do you keep track of who the primary? Because in that riding, I'm going to be biking to that riding in about an hour. So I know that riding is not in danger of going progressive conservative.
No, it's in fact not in danger. It's one of 2 safe seats in Ontario for the NDP. Right. So I mean, no, but it never was federally, and never was. It was very, very
right.
liberal for a long, long time.
Right.
So the fact that we won federally, and then Peggy won and lost, and then I kept winning, certainly provincially, it's a safe seat. Alexa Gilmore just won, and she won by a wide margin. I mean, there was no contest, really. I saw maybe a half dozen Liberal signs. I mean, again, that's part of the problem, first past the post, in a sense, but it also shows, like my election did, that can be upturned.
So you're MPP from 2006 to 2017, and we did touch on this, but maybe you'll elaborate. But you passed more private members' bills into law than anyone in Ontario's history. So maybe now is a good time to maybe toot your own horn a little bit and talk about, we did touch on some of these trans rights. Banning
conversion therapy, Trans Day of Remembrance. That's the only one still in Canada, which requires people to stand for a moment of silence. Parent equality. Those are just the queer bills, but there were a lot of others, things like $10 minimum wage, things like PTSD coverage for first responders. That covers police, firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers. I mean, that also I tabled 5 times before, it got some clout. And then the government, sometimes the government would end up bringing them in as their own bill, but they always originated in my desk and were noted as my first tabling. There are quite a few. I mean, there were a lot of them. The very first one that I did as tri-party bill was recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide in Ukraine, which, I was thinking about that bill the other day, and that was a tri-party bill. And yes, we did. And just like prayers for Ukraine right now, just saying.
Well, literally, I think within the last 90 minutes, there was Zelensky was at the White House, and the VP and the POTUSA were basically belittling him. Like, you're not grateful enough. Come back when you're ready to, say thank you, kiss the ring, and basically give up some land to our buddy Putin. Like, it's really the darkest timeline.
Oh yeah, and actually, it's really impacting our political landscape too. That very issue. I mean, that very issue, to see that Trump is, among other things, in Putin's pocket, is scaring all of the Ukrainians and Polish and Eastern Europeans in our communities, and we have a lot of them, especially in the West End of Toronto, as you may know. So this is really changing the landscape of voting, and we see that with the liberal fortunes shifting. I mean, that has play, and it that's one of many issues, but certainly the association of our conservatives with their Republicans isn't doing them proud these days.
Yeah, it upsets me. I'm not even sure what I can do. Maybe you can tell, as a guy living in South Etobicoke here, what exactly can I do? But when it's just such a horrific turn of events where it's anyone with any reasonable ability to read the news and kind of be critical with your analysis of it, that Trump is somehow beholden to Putin.
Oh yeah, and of course Musk.
Well,
so
right.
I mean, this is an oligarch, and this is, I mean, let's face it, this is, I mean, people throw around the term fascist, but that's where we're headed. I mean, he's gotten rid of the Fourth Estate, essentially. Freedom of the press is under attack. Everything's under attack, and it makes you thankful for our parliamentary system. In part, I just have to shout out to the parliamentary system, because like our prime ministers don't have the power to just write edicts the way that presidents do in a republic. So yeah, I mean, and that's the way Hitler did it. He got elected too, minority, but got elected and just kept writing off those executive orders, changing everything. I just wish, when progressives got government, they'd do the same thing. I mean, the Democrats blew it in retrospect. I mean, they could have protected us far more than they did. I mean, yes, the Tories always stack the courts. They could have too, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just, again, we see this time and time again when progressive governments get into power, when they could change dramatically the way things are done, they don't, and they bow to pressure. And then when conservatives get into power, they run amok, right? So hopefully that's a lesson to all the progressives out there. You get some power, do something with it, for heaven's sakes.
Well, I'm thinking of a quote from Michelle Obama. I think the quote went something like, when they go low, we go high. Okay. And I'm a pretty nice, fair guy. Okay. I'm happy to see you. We're going to have a nice chat. We might not agree on anything, but it's going to be a civil discussion. But this, when they go low, we go high bullshit is a recipe for disaster. No.
Oh, yeah.
Get down there, get dirty. They're going to fight dirty. We fight back.
Yeah, no, and it's true in the church too. Like when you see Christo nationalism, you see all the problems that are happening down there that stem in the churches. I just look at, Nazi Germany, all of a sudden we're all talking about it. But 98% of the churches, a lot of them hanging Nazi flags, swastikas in their sanctuaries. About 2% of the church was the confessing church. And I'm basically running on that now. We're too nice. Nice is a 4-letter word when you're dealing with fascists. You don't bullies, or you don't negotiate, stand up to them. That's what you do. And I don't feel like we're still doing that in Canada. Like, we shouldn't be letting Trump in the country. We should be rescinding Musk's Canadian citizenship, who knew he had one. And we should be standing up to this bully.
I read something that we can't actually, with the current legislation, we can't rescind that citizenship. Like, the only way you can take it away is if he got it by fraud or something to that effect. Like, it is a nice symbolic thing. Charlie Angus was here a few weeks ago, and I know he's behind some kind of petition, but I don't believe it's legally possible to actually take away Musk's Canadian citizenship.
Oh, that would be interesting. I think you can, if you can prove that they have committed crimes. And I think he's Australia's done it. They're a Commonwealth country with a parliamentary democracy modeled on the mothership, and they've essentially banned him from taking part in their elections, and other people like Macron's doing it in France. He's acted there to freeze his holdings and things. I mean, other countries are doing something, and they're certainly doing way more than we are. So I would like to see us do more. Yeah.
And you mentioned the mothership. Don't you feel like with this 51st state rhetoric and this threat of annexation that our mothership has been less than parental? And
yeah. What's up with
that?
Us. I know.
Everyone's like, oh, I want the greatest hockey player of all time to say something. And yeah, that would be nice. But let's what about Mother England. And,
yeah. That was very disappointing. I mean, but you're seeing it happen, right? Like this is what happens when there's a bully. This is what happened, with Germany. I mean, you see people, kiss up rather than be invaded, or suck up rather than have tariffs, and they think this is working because what's going to happen. It's just more demands. Like bullies don't back down, right? So and that is quintessential Trump. So. Yeah.
Oh boy. Now, going back to when you were an MPP for those many years. So Howard Hampton was the leader of the NDP party in this province, and then he was stepping down. So how close was it? I know Andrea Horwath becomes the leader of that party, but how close was it to, the Radical Reverend being leader of the NDP party in this province?
I had no aspirations for that job at all. I supported Peter Tabuns in that race, didn't win. That wasn't where I wanted to spend my time. I was happy just getting stuff done. Like that was, and my electors, like that. I mean, the people that elected me because I was kind of queen of the tri-party bill and got things done. And activists liked me. They knew they could come to me and get someone who would listen, and not only listen and give them a polite shuffle at the door, but actually act on something and be realistic too. Like there were lots of great ideas, right? But to be realistic with them and tell them the truth. This is a great idea, but not going to fly right now. So I mean, that's what I enjoyed.
So some may have floated you, but you were never on board with running for the leader.
No, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Spend my money and my time on, and I supported Marit in her role, but no.
Okay, what about federally?
It was kind of interesting. I was asked by the party if I would be running there, and I said no. I reluctantly said, well, if you've got nobody else, and talk to everybody else, and there are people that should have that job way before me, is what I basically suggested.
Right.
And I'm not, and I wasn't interested in running provincially either after I gave it some thought, even in a safe seat, because, I've been there, done that. And you're up against, look at the odds at Queen's Park now. I don't like those odds, even in official opposition. Are they getting anything done? Are any bills getting passed? Very, very, very few, right? That's the reality there.
Okay, because you did run, right, for Tom Mulcair, replacing Tom Mulcair. You did run officially.
Yeah, I did put my hat in the ring there.
Because it's like $30,000 or something to do that, right? Like there's a fee attached.
Well, I didn't get to that point.
Okay.
At that point I had some what were quite serious health problems. I had 2 mini strokes in kind of rapid succession, and so that took me out of that game. And this is the hand of God in some ways, because I'm glad that I didn't pursue that. Now that would have been, no. I'm glad. It's not something I want to do. I actually love church work, and even there, I don't want to do that full time. I found that where I think I'm most effective, and if there is such a thing as call, which I do believe in for us all, what's your call, follow your bliss, and all of that. It is trying to save kids' lives, and the best way to do that is to speak as often as I can to as many people as will hear me on 50 years of queer activism and how we got here and why we should stay here.
Well, saving kids' lives, I'm in favor of it. I want to go on the public record here. I'm pro saving kids' lives. Yeah. So at the end of this chat, we'll dive into that a little deeper. But I want to. So you had a couple of strokes. Can you share a little more?
There were many TIAs, they call them, but it was a wake-up call.
Yeah,
it was a wake-up call to maybe I should be looking after me for a while here. And honestly, working 12 hours a day, which politics and church sometimes demand, I found enough of that.
And you haven't had any strokes since?
No. There's the miracle of hypertensive drugs.
I was going to ask you, so because they put me on a blood thinner. Are you on blood thinners?
They're mainly diuretics actually for hypertension. Okay. But
Okay, the Radical Reverend knows her medicine here too.
Yeah. But I mean, bottom line is for all of these things, it's all the good things. Eat well, exercise, blah blah.
What is your exercise of choice?
I used to be a runner when I was younger, and now I'm a walker. I try to get my 10,000 steps in every day, and pretty well do that, average that anyway. So and do a bit of weights, and I still. Yeah, it's important. It's important to keep your body fit. Might not save you, but gives you an extra year or two.
Well, speaking of running, now I'm thinking of when Kathleen Wynne was running for Premier and all those ads. She's doing these runs, right? Yeah. What was your relationship and what is it like with Kathleen Wynne?
Oh, we're friends. In fact, this week I'm on a panel with her and Christine Elliott at Victoria University. We're doing a panel about, kind of what it was like to work together, because we did. And so, I worked with Kathleen to get some things done. And there's lots of things that the Liberal government of that day did that I was definitely not in favor of. But on queer issues, for example, we were on the same page. So it was really handy to have somebody that I could talk to across the aisle on those issues. So there's that. And Christine Elliott signed on to just think about it, a conservative signed on to my trans rights bill. So there was that. And a conservative, Lisa MacLeod, signed on to my Trans Day of Remembrance bill. So thank God for that, because now that there's conservatives in power, they got some splaining to do, if they backtrack on that.
Well, I mean, hopefully they have better sense than that. But why do you think it happens so much? So it's so rare now that people cross the aisles and collaborate with a member of the other party. It just seems now like it's our team versus their team. There's very little working together, collaboration. Yeah,
I mean, it does happen, as I said, on committee work, but it's very sad, and I don't like it. And that's not an atmosphere, I think, that's conducive to getting anything done. Let's get rid of first past the post, number one. And second of all, if you're already elected, please, you can work on something. You can work on something with conservatives. So look for the something.
Okay, I'm going to give you a gift here. Take a little moment before we get back to it. Loving this very much. But this is a loaded question, Radical Reverend. But do you enjoy Italian food?
Yeah. My last name's DiNovo.
No, I know here, but you never know. I think my last guest, I'm like, I got Italian food, and he's like, I'm celiac, and I'm like, oh crap, like there's going to be a lot of gluten in this lasagna here. Would you take home with you today a frozen lasagna from Palma Pasta, a delicious Italian food in Mississauga and Oakville?
Of course I would.
Okay.
It would be my delight.
Worth the drive then. Absolutely. Yeah. You'll be going home with a lasagna from Palma Pasta. Does the Radical Reverend enjoy a can of craft beer now and then? Do you drink it?
I'm not a beer drinker. I'm a wino, but I know beer drinkers, and I like to have some in the fridge, so sure enough.
Okay, I'll send you home with some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery. They're here in southern Etobicoke. Yeah. And I have a measuring tape for you, the good people at Ridley Funeral Home. As a reverend, have you, what's the term I'm looking for, presided?
Yes, lots of funerals. And in fact, I still do funerals and weddings, folks. So if you're getting married and you don't have to be queer.
You don't have to be queer, but it helps. Because then you can say the person who ordained the first queer wedding.
And certainly I presided at funerals for all sorts of folk. And those are those joyous and depressing and sad times are the times that I think people are most at their spiritual, and I like to be part of that, and it's definitely something that I continue.
Just this morning, I recorded a new episode of Building Toronto Skyline, which is a podcast from Nick Iones from Fusion Corp Development Incorporated, and we talked about skyscrapers. There's a big skyscraper going at 1 Yonge Street. There's another one, if it ever gets done, at Yonge called The One at Yonge and Bloor. So suddenly we have skyscrapers in the city over 300 meters. And Nick's the expert when it comes to this development. And I urge people to subscribe and listen to Building Toronto Skyline. Just before we get off Ridley Funeral Home, they have a measuring tape for you, Cheri. That's for you to measure what you wish. You never know if you have to measure something. And Brad, who is the owner and the funeral director at Ridley Funeral Home, he has a great podcast, and we recorded a fresh episode this week. His podcast is called Life's Undertaking, and we were speaking with, there's a hospice. It's close to Sherway Gardens, actually. Dorothy Lee Hospice, and somebody from the Dorothy Lee Hospice came by, and we talked about that important service. They're doing a wonderful work at this hospice.
Wonderful. No, I have worked with funeral directors and you know, yeah, it's a really important service, and again, it's something officiating at those moments in families' lives is an honor, and still do it.
Well, much like you felt a calling, right? When you became a reverend, you felt a calling. And when I talked to Brad, he describes his work as a funeral director as a calling.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it's part of every faith that you have people that prepare bodies, that look after our bodies when we are no longer in them, and that deal with families in their worst moments. And it's an honor, and you have to be called to work like that and work like ministry. Yeah,
absolutely. Last tip for you before I ask you about a special award you received in 2022. But I just want to let everybody know that if you have old cables, old electronics, old devices in a drawer, maybe it's in a room, who knows, in a closet, don't throw it in the garbage because those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and put in your postal code and find out where you can drop it off to be properly recycled. You got it, Reverend? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You were awarded the Order of Canada, right?
Yeah.
So you got a pin?
I got a medal. It's a medal.
It's a medal?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the pin? Is that like a companion to the Order of Canada? Like a
yeah. Oh,
when
you get
level up?
get a lapel pin that you're supposed to wear if you're in public, and I have a couple of those kicking around.
So
and
you were proud to receive this
of
designation.
course, it was wonderful. It's
Okay.
the highest honor.
Do you know Wayne Gretzky's never received his Order of Canada?
Really?
Yeah,
That's
like, I was
wacky.
just reading about it. It's been years. He's never gone to Ottawa, and I guess you can get it in a private ceremony, but you're supposed to do it with others who are receiving it, right?
Yeah, of
but,
course. And that actually is wonderful. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. I thought it might be a little like a high school graduation, but it was fantastic. I mean, you meet amazing people at these things, and hey, being in the Governor General's house is always a treat, and the food was good too. So there you go. Yeah.
Do you remember who else received the Order of Canada at your ceremony?
Jan Martel, I think that's his name, author of Life of Pi, was there, and it was funny because he's a very small man and very nondescript looking, wasn't dressed up at all. Nobody was talking to him in the sort of ante room before we were introduced, and I was wondering who this guy was, and then after we found out who he was, because he got the Order of Canada, my daughter and I immediately rushed over because we're such fans and talked to him, and he's the sweetest man. He was there with his mum.
Amazing.
He's French-Canadian, and talked about his next book. And so we had our fangirl moments, which was lovely. So yeah, you get to meet people like that. And it's an amazing honor. I mean, I've got lots and lots of others, but that was particularly special. Yeah.
Do you still have your radio show, The Radical Reverend?
I do. I've been doing it for like 27 years. So yeah.
So tell me about this. So this is on CIUT?
Yes, CIUT 89.5 FM, and you can listen to it in podcast too, the Radical Reverend, wherever you get those. And yeah, I've been doing it for forever. I took a brief hiatus when I was first elected, and then went back as 3 women. We changed the name of the show, and I'd have a woman from different political parties come and talk about political issues. I have a great photo of Christine Elliott and Kathleen Wynne and me, all there. So I mean, it was fun, and it is fun, and it tends to be political, but it's not always. Sometimes it's about faith. Yeah.
So if somebody, because obviously we're speaking to podcast listeners, so you're fishing where the fish are. The name of the podcast to subscribe to is 3 Women?
No, the Radical Reverend.
Okay.
It is the Radical Reverend.
The Radical Reverend.
3
of
Women
course.
was only in place for a few years back
Gotcha.
then. But because I was in politics. But yeah, no, I'm back to being who I am.
And how often do you drop new episodes of
It's
the Radical Reverend?
every single week. It used to be summer hiatus, and now we just go full time all year. So
Good for you.
yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome here. Now, you mentioned you're focusing these days on saving kids' lives. Could we maybe
yeah.
spend a little more time on that?
As the powers that be are waging war on trans and gender diverse folk. That means trans and gender diverse children. That's who they're aiming it at, and their families. And denying children health care is what it amounts to. So that's horrendous in and of itself. But also just outing them to parents who probably, if they were supportive, would already know that their child is trans or gender diverse. And if they don't, that endangers the child at home and puts them more at risk of suicide. They're already at risk of suicide. We know that queer kids are most at risk of suicide of all kids, and kids and queer kids of color, add to that. So that's what's happening, and it's happening across our country. It's happening across the states. It's happening around the world, and it's a real huge step backwards from all the rights that we've been fighting for 50 years, and trust me, folk, if you're LGBTQ and you're not a T, they're going to be coming for you next too, because we know how this movie goes. And we already know that in some states, you can't say gay. Well, guess what? Same-sex marriage is on the chopping block too. Everything that we fought for is on the chopping block. We can't go back. And you see what they've done with women's rights. So we no longer in much of this world have control over our own bodies. And now, with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So this is the era we're in. And if you ever wondered what you would be doing in the 1930s in Germany, guess what? You're there. What you're doing is what you'd be doing. So live into that moment.
Well, it sounds like you're describing The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what's happening down there, isn't it? I mean, it's not quite as colorful and well scripted, but yeah, that's what's happening. And again, this has been in the making for a while. Now they have the power.
Okay, we could spend we can spend hours talking about down there, but maybe we focus on Canada.
Yeah,
I feel
it's happening here too.
So so let me ask you some real specific questions here. Okay, so
yeah,
because I'm just thinking of my life. So I got 4 kids, but I'm thinking I have a boy who's turning 11, like very soon. He'll be 11 years old. Okay, so I'm just so I understand. So let's take me out of the equation. But if my son confides, I don't know, at school to a guidance counselor or maybe to his teacher or something, he confides that. I'm trying to, so that he identifies as a she.
He's wrestling with gender issues.
Yeah,
and that
right.
he'd like to be called she and her instead of he and him. That's. I always for heterosexual people, I try to give them an analogy, right?
Yeah,
what if you confided in your teacher, your guidance counselor, and said, you know what, I'm having sex, and I'm 15 or 14 or something. Would you want them telling your parents?
No.
Exactly. So why should they divulge anything that's personal, that's divulged to you in private, to somebody supportive, to other people? This is overriding the rights of a child, right? And putting them in danger. So again, try to This is about privacy, and this is about confidentiality, and this is about those therapeutic moments, that we've always held as kind of sacrosanct, and and that's breaching all of that.
So, but as we speak in Ontario, there is no law that says the teacher needs to inform the parents of this.
And in fact, there couldn't be, because it goes against Toby's law, which is trans rights.
Law.
It goes against the laws of the country too, because trans rights are now federal. But the only way the provinces got around that is bringing in the notwithstanding clause, which is a way of overriding charter rights.
But that sounds like the executive orders.
Exactly, that is what it is. And so you've got 3 provinces that have done that. So I mean, for what? To take away the rights of children, and this is outrageous, right? So we parents, if you value your children's good relationships with other adults in their lives that they're confiding in, I mean, you want your children to be able to confide in teachers and guidance counselors.
Okay, so let me. So there's one thing when we talk about you're questioning your gender, your sexuality, but what about actually intervening with like hormones and
Okay,
procedures
so
like
there's
that?
all sorts of misinformation
Right.
about
Yes,
that.
we are here for.
Nobody is performing surgery on children. So get that out of your head. That is not happening. And we have one of the best gender clinics anywhere, and that's at Sick Kids right here in Toronto. And it's a long process even to get any drugs of any sort. This is a long process. It involves therapy. It involves all sorts of things, medical. It does involve parents if you're a minor, of course. I mean, it involves all of that. And nothing is done lightly, and nothing is done irreversibly either. So this is just, they've picked on a very small portion of the population. And this is the way dictatorships work. We've seen this movie before, folks. First they came, and the same thing happened in Germany. They've hit trans people first. Berlin was a mecca for queers. They had lots of queer clubs and they had sex reassignment surgery in Berlin. It was a center throughout Europe. So the Nazis hit on them first because nobody understands it. And if you maybe haven't met one. And so that was an easy one. And then they just branched out from there, to communists, to Jews, to everybody else. So, I mean, this is how it works. And so don't get taken up with fear. Whatever you fear, you become what you fear is an old spiritual axiom. But I mean, yeah, if you act like a dictator where your children are concerned, guess what? Yeah.
So I'm glad you're here because there is a lot of misinformation on this front.
Huge amounts of misinformation, and it's done as a scare tactic. It's done to, oh, look over here at the accident. Don't look over there at the fact that, by the way, you're making less than you ever made. By the way, your expenses are higher than they ever were. I mean, by the way, you don't have a family doctor. Don't look at the real issues. No. Be frightened about puberty blockers. Right. Like, I mean, in what world is this a major issue? But they make it the major issue because they don't want you to talk about what are the major issues. And that's the problem.
Well, that's a huge problem. And speaking of huge problems, why... Help me understand why anti-trans has become so mainstream.
Jordan Peterson, among others. I mean, you've got some social media influencers who have taken up this. You've got it's fear mongering for a very small percentage of the population. It's stirring up fear in places that people don't know, and about issues they have no idea about, and feeding them misinformation. I mean, this is like, fake news. And it's fake news targeting people who have been the subject for bullying forever. These are the most vulnerable people. Yeah. These are the people who get beaten up already without all of this happening. These are the most at-risk kids. I mean, so pick on them, why don't we? I mean, it's really that ugly, and it's really that stupid, and it's really that time-tested. It works, right?
And thank you for your advocacy and for speaking out and for being there and saving kids' lives.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen too many deaths, both in my job at church and in my job at state, right? Too many deaths.
Too many deaths. Okay, wow. Again, a little bit of a channel change here, but I couldn't help but notice when I was doing my homework that you did win a Bicycling Leadership Award. Okay, so as a
bunch of stuff, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, there's a long list of things you got. I mean, Rosie O'Donnell's given you awards, okay?
Yeah, that was the P-Flag Award for 2012 for the trans rights. She was in town. She presented it. It was good. So the Bicycling Leadership Award... And it was from the Share the Road Cycling Coalition. Yeah,
so
it was a 1 meter rule that I fought for. And that we kind of got the Liberals. I think, it did sort of pass. There were some caveats and stuff. And it's not being enforced either. But that was just to keep cyclists safe on the roads, that you should have, where possible, have a meter between you and the cyclist next to you. Of course, look out in the snowbound roads now, kind of not possible. But I mean, wherever possible.
Well, a week ago, you were 100% right, because I didn't stop riding, and there were unrideable separated bike lanes for days and days and days. But I'm happy to report Mother Nature, I guess they finally got to plowing, and Mother Nature helped out quite a bit. And you can finally, I got my 8-year-old bike in these things, so you can get out there and you can bike. But that 1 meter rule, very good. And I taught my kids this, but if you don't feel you have the meter, take the lane.
Yeah.
Like I take that lane and they yell at me, they call me nasty names, they curse me out, and I just smile and keep going here.
Yeah, it's your right. Yeah.
It's my right, damn it. Cheri DiNovo. Wow. Okay, here. So in the honestly, I could talk to you forever, but in the final moments, is there anything else? Obviously you're doing important work with the LGBTQ plus community, and you continued success there. But is there anything else on your mind as you were making your way to finally make your Toronto Mike debut?
A couple of shout outs. I think one of the things I won recently was one of the 52 women that in Toronto that have changed Toronto. And this is throughout history, and there's only 15 of us left alive. So the Toronto Museum is having an exhibit about us, and there was all sorts of stuff that happened last year about this. But so that's coming up at the Toronto Museum.
Well, that's amazing. Congrats.
So check that out.
And only 15 are actually alive.
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to name the other 14 right now.
Yeah. And then the other thing is the Day of Pink. I'm talking about saving kids' lives. This is a fantastic queer organization across Canada that runs programs, sort of queer positive programs in schools. And so I love to support them. And they're having a gala on April 9th. So buy your tickets, folks. It's a great party. It's down the Distillery District. So support them. And these are local happenings, which I think people should know about.
Okay, Rosie Gray T.O. is a Wikipedia editor who's listening very closely to us, so I have a very pointed question. You need to confirm or deny this, okay? Did you help smuggle LSD into Canada from California in hollowed-out Bibles?
I did indeed, when I was 15 years old. And LSD, by the way, was not illegal then. It was under the Food and Drug Act.
That's an important distinction there. But I think the idea...
It was still smuggling, because I didn't pay duty on it, and it wasn't declared, yeah.
Well, this is how you become the Radical Reverend, right? You got to do it inside hollowed-out Bibles.
Hey, me, my political opponents used it first time I ran. There was a drug dealer, and they were like, well, I was a 15-year-old street kid. I always tell the story, and I say, there's two things you can do as a street kid and a 15-year-old girl. Working is not one of them, because you're 15. So I chose, I think, the safer route, quite frankly.
Absolutely. As your work with the church, have you noticed a decline in attendance lately? Like, what's going on? How healthy is the United Church in 2025?
Well, I can tell you that at Trinity St. Paul's, my swan song service, Christmas Eve, we had almost 700 people there. So I can tell, in our Growing Edge, we're 20-somethings. So I'd say, find a church that speaks to you, and they are there. And there are some real success stories out there.
I just want to let the listenership know I got a fun fact from the official Toronto historian of the Toronto Mike podcast. That's Jeremy Hopkin, and he says that the St. Paul's United Church was originally a Methodist church, and in 1889 it was designed by Henry Langley and Edmund Burke, and it's a heritage building, and it's very impressive. So Jeremy Hopkin just wants you to know he thinks the St. Paul's United Church is a great architectural specimen.
Trinity St. Paul's is amalgam now. But
Trinity
Lester
St.
Pearson
Paul's,
used to sing in the choir. Like, it was the church for many, many years back in the heyday of Christendom in this country. So, yeah.
Radical Reverend Cheri DiNovo, you're now an FOTM. That means Friend of Toronto Mike. You're welcome back here anytime. I'm really honored I had a chance to chat you up for over an hour. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if you want that lasagna, you got to take a photo with me by Toronto Tree after this. So before you escape, you got to take that photo with me.
No problemo.
Was this good for you? Did you enjoy the experience?
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Rock on.
Let Rosie O'Donnell know. But I don't know if I am eligible for an award. But I'm definitely an ally, without a doubt here. So maybe Rosie's got another award for me. We'll see.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,642nd show. Where would we best follow the Radical Reverend on social media?
Oh, I'm on X, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Insta. So any of those places. So there's that. And then, of course, there's my radio show, and that's on CIUT. And so you can find me there under the Radical Reverend. And yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm easy to find. Talk to me.
Well, I talk to you on X, and it's the only reason I really go check my DMs anymore, because I might have a message from the Radical Reverend. But I gotta say, it's greasy there now. Like, I do not enjoy my X experience.
No, I mean, well, yeah. I mean, it's an evil overlord. But then I also, I like really, Zuckerberg. I mean, they like pick your evil overlords, I guess, at this point. I mean,
pick your billionaire.
Exactly.
Jeez, oh my
exactly.
goodness.
I say use the master's tools. Use it against them.
Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Much love to all who made this possible. Again, that's Great Lakes Brewery. That's Palma Pasta. We got a lasagna for the Radical Reverend here. That's recyclemyelectronics.ca. That's Building Toronto Skyline. And of course, Ridley Funeral Home. See you all Monday when Ed the Sock will be in the basement. Although I don't know at this moment if it's going to be Ed or Steve Kersner. Tune in to find out. See you all then.